My name is Elena, and I'm 32 years old. There's something about that number that still surprises me, not because 32 feels old, but because I wasn't sure I'd get here without disappearing entirely. I'm standing in my apartment right now, in the kitchen, actually. The morning light is doing that thing where it makes everything look like it's been filtered through honey. Coffee steaming in a mug my husband gave me. No one else's name on it, no one else's expectations wrapped around the handle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a story about the cost of being needed, about how love can look exactly like control when you're not paying attention. It's about the moment I realized that my family didn't want me to grow. They wanted me to remain useful. And what happened when I decided that wasn't enough anymore? Let me take you back about 15 years to when I was 17 and still believed that family was an unquestionable good. That's important because most of this story lives in that belief and what happened when I tried to outgrow it. I grew up in a house where love was currency, not money, though money played a role. I mean love as transaction, love as leverage, love as the thing your parents dangled just out of reach and told you to jump higher to catch. My family is 4 people: my mother, Margaret, my father, Robert, my younger brother, Marcus, and me. We're not a close family in the way people talk about being close. We're enmeshed. That's what my therapist would eventually call it. But for most of my life, I just called it normal. My mother was a woman who had dreams she never pursued. She'd wanted to be a dancer, she'd tell us, usually while standing at the kitchen sink with her hands in dishwater, looking somewhere we couldn't see. But she had children young. She had a husband who believed his career came first. She had a mother who thought ambition in women was unseemly, so she became something else instead. She became the architect of our lives. She built us like houses and lived inside our walls. My father was the kind of man who thought presence meant you were doing your job. He went to work, he came home, he sat in his chair, and he expected the rest of us to orbit around him like planets with no gravity of our own. He loved us, I think. But his love came with conditions written in invisible ink. Be successful, but not more successful than him. Be confident, but never question him. Be independent, but always available when he needed something. Marcus was 4 years younger than me, and he arrived into this family like a small golden key that unlocked a door I didn't know existed. He was wanted in a way I had never been wanted. He was the son, the second chance, the proof that my parents could do something right after me. I spent my childhood being the experimental model. My mother tried every parenting philosophy on me. I was sleep trained, then attachment parented, then disciplined, then indulged. Sometimes all in the same week, depending on what she'd read or what her friends were doing. I became good at adjusting, good at reading the room and becoming what was needed. My brother, meanwhile, was the refined model. My parents had figured out what they were doing by then, or they thought they had. He got consistency, he got certainty, he got the benefit of them knowing who he was supposed to be before he was even born. By the time I was a teenager, the shape of our family had solidified into something that looked like this. I was the responsible one. Marcus was the promising one. My mother was the martyr who had given up everything. My father was the provider who deserved to be served. No one ever said these things out loud. That would have required acknowledging them. Instead, they lived in the small decisions that accumulated like sediment until they became the bedrock of who I was supposed to be. When I was 17, my mother got sick. Not seriously, not in the way that ends stories, just seriously enough to be inconvenient, a chronic pain condition that meant she couldn't work her part-time job at the dental office anymore. That meant she couldn't do all the things she'd built her identity around, being busy, being essential, being the woman who did it all, even though no one asked her to. I remember my father's face when the doctor explained it. He looked the way someone looks when a vase they've been ignoring finally breaks, irritated that he now had to deal with the consequences of something he'd never really paid attention to. My mother, though, she became luminous. I don't think she meant to, but suddenly she was the center of a story, a tragedy with a silver lining, a woman suffering beautifully. She told everyone about it, at church, at the grocery store, when people called just to say hello. She built a narrative where she was both the villain and the victim, a woman whose own body had betrayed her, which meant she'd have to rely on others, which meant everyone had to step up. That's where I came in. I didn't volunteer exactly, it's just that I was there, and I was capable, and I was old enough to understand that this was what family meant. This was the proof of love, your willingness to disappear into someone else's crisis. I started driving her to her doctor's appointments, 3 times a week, sometimes 4. I drove her to physical therapy. I helped her shower because moving her arms above her head made her cry. I cooked meals because Standing at the stove for too long made her pain spike. I did her laundry, I managed her medications, I became her logistical system, the operating system that ran her life. I was still in school, studying nursing. I'd chosen it because I was good at taking care of people, and I thought that meant I should build a life around it. I didn't realize then that I'd already built a life around it. I was practicing. All those hours at my mother's side weren't just help, they were training. My father, during this time, continued to do what he'd always done. He worked, he came home, he sat in his chair. When my mother couldn't manage something, he'd call for me, instead of doing it himself or asking Marcus. Marcus was in his last year of high school, he'd say. Marcus had his own things to worry about. Marcus was going to have an important future. The implication was clear. My future was already decided. It was going to be this one, on my knees, in service. What's strange is that I didn't recognize it as unfair. I recognized it as love. My mother told me how grateful she was, how I was her rock, her anchor, the thing keeping her from drowning. She said this often, and each time she said it, I felt a little less separate from her, like I was being absorbed into her crisis. Like my life and her life were becoming the same life, just experienced through different nervous systems. By the time I was 22, my mother had mostly recovered. The pain didn't go away, it never did, but she found ways to manage it. She went back to work part-time. She started going to her book club again. She got her life back. She didn't ask what I wanted to do with mine. I don't think it occurred to her that I had one. I was in my second year of nursing school, living at home to save money, working weekends at a hospital to pay for my education. I was exhausted in the way that feels permanent, like you're not tired on top of yourself. You're tired beneath yourself, like exhaustion is your foundation, and everything else is built on top of it. Marcus was in college, living in the dorms. He'd gotten into a good university on a partial scholarship. My father had used his connections to help. He was studying engineering. He had a girlfriend. He went out on weekends. He had the kind of life that looked like a life. It had shape and movement and direction. My mother had started what I'll call noticing what I had or didn't have. She would mention how lovely it would be if I had a boyfriend, how empty the house felt with just her and my father at dinner, how quiet my life seemed. These observations came wrapped in concern, but they were really instructions. They were the script of what I was supposed to be doing at this age. When I didn't start dating, she started helping. She told our family friends that I was looking. She arranged coffee meetings with the sons of her colleagues. She started asking me about my preferences, as if my preferences were a problem to be solved rather than something to be honored. I remember one conversation, sitting at the kitchen table while she chopped vegetables for dinner, one of the few things her pain allowed her to do. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "you're not getting younger. Nursing is wonderful, but it's not a life." I asked her what she meant. I was genuinely confused. I was in school, I was working, I was building something. "I mean," she said, and now she did look at me, "that you need balance, family, someone to come home to. You're spending all your time taking care of other people. When are you going to let someone take care of you?" It sounded like love. It sounded like concern. But underneath it was the real message. Your value is in your usefulness. Stop being useful to strangers and be useful to a husband instead. That's where your life should be. I didn't argue because I didn't know how. I didn't have language for it. I just felt this settling in my chest, like something heavy being placed on top of me, and the weight of it slowly compressing me into a smaller shape. Around this time, my father had a crisis at work. A project failed. He came home furious, and he didn't really come home. He came home and stayed in his office. A door closed between him and all of us. My mother approached this with the tenderness she usually reserved for her own suffering. She brought him meals. She told him it wasn't his fault. She told him he deserved rest. I brought him a drink one evening, thinking this was what you did for people you loved. He barely acknowledged me. Instead, he launched into an explanation of everything that had gone wrong, the incompetence of his team, the unreasonable deadlines, the way the company had taken advantage of him. I listened. I asked questions. I validated his feelings. I was performing the role I'd been trained for: the audience, the witness, the emotional container. My mother found me later and thanked me. She said, "Your father needs to know we're here for him right now." She said, "Family rallies around each other." She said I was good at understanding people, and that was a gift. What she meant was, your function right now is to absorb his feelings. Your job is to make him feel less alone. Your purpose is to be the space where his pain can land without having to face consequences. The deal was never explicit, but I understood it anyway. I understood that in my family, love meant availability. Love meant dropping what you were doing when someone else needed something. Love meant your life was secondary to everyone else's emergencies, and everyone else's life was always, by definition, an emergency. I graduated nursing school at 24 and got a job at a hospital in the city, about 40 minutes from my parents' house. I was proud. I had done something on my own. I had pushed through the exhaustion and the competing demands, and the voice in my head, that was my mother's voice, telling me I wasn't prioritizing the right things. I moved into an apartment with 2 other nurses. For the first time in my life, I was not accessible. If my mother needed something, I couldn't drop everything and drive over. If my father wanted someone to listen to his day, it would have to wait. If Marcus needed advice, I couldn't answer my phone at the drop of a hat. My family did not like this. It started subtly. My mother called more often, just checking in, she'd say, but the calls always came when I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift and was collapsing on the couch. She'd keep me on the phone for an hour, telling me about her day, her pain, her friend who didn't appreciate her, the thing my father had said that hurt her feelings. My father began using my mother as a messenger. "Can you call your mother? She said you haven't visited in 3 weeks." Never mind that I'd been there the previous weekend and had worked a double shift that week. 3 weeks sounded better. 3 weeks sounded like neglect. Marcus started using his struggles as a reason I needed to be more present. His girlfriend had broken up with him. Could I come home? He was struggling in one of his classes. Could I help? He was feeling lonely. Could I come stay a weekend? Each of these requests came with the same implication. Your life is less important than our need for you. Your job, your apartment, your own friends, your own healing, these are luxuries. Being there for us is the responsibility that matters. I didn't recognize that I was being manipulated because manipulation had never required actual bad intentions in my family. My mother wasn't trying to trap me. She genuinely believed that I should prioritize her. My father wasn't trying to control me. He genuinely believed that his needs were more important than mine. Marcus wasn't trying to use me. He genuinely believed that being his sister meant I owed him unlimited emotional labor. They weren't villains in a story. They were just people who had learned from their own families and the culture around them that love looked like obligation, and they were passing it down like an heirloom, like something precious that should be preserved. But something in me was starting to resist. Not consciously at first, just a fatigue that went deeper than physical tiredness, a resentment that I felt guilty for feeling, which meant I pushed it down and tried harder. I visited more often, I took more calls, I gave more advice, I became more available. The theory was, if I could just do enough, if I could just be enough, they would finally feel complete, and then maybe I could rest. It never worked that way. The more I gave, the more they needed. It's not that they were greedy, it's that they had learned to measure love in units of sacrifice. The more you gave up for them, the more they knew you loved them. And so the bar kept rising. I met James when I was 26. He was a doctor at the hospital where I worked. Smart, kind, the kind of man who made you feel like he was actually listening when you talked, not just waiting for his turn to speak. We dated for about a year before I brought him home to meet my family. I was nervous, not because I worried they wouldn't like him, but because I worried what they would do with him, what stories they would tell him about me, what version of me they would present, what claims they would make on my time and attention now that I was in a relationship. My mother loved him immediately, not because she knew him, but because he represented a solution to a problem she'd been trying to solve. The problem of me being independent. Now I was paired off. Now I had someone else to focus on. In her mind, this meant I'd finally gotten my priorities straight. My father appreciated his professional credentials. The fact that he was a doctor meant something to my father. It validated our family in some way, reflected well on us. Marcus thought he was cool and started trying to be friends with him, which was strange and made me uncomfortable. But I didn't know how to articulate why. James, for his part, was curious about my family. He came from a different kind of family, one where people had boundaries, where love didn't require self-annihilation, where you could say no without it being treated as a betrayal. "Your mom calls you 5 times a day," he said one evening, gently, about a week after he'd met them. "Not 5 times," I said, defensive. "Maybe 3, 4, if she's worried about something." What is she worried about? I thought about it. Everything, I guess. That I'm eating enough, that I'm working too hard, that I'm not prioritizing relationships, that I'm not happy. Do you think she's worried, or do you think she's checking in? I knew the difference, even then. I just didn't want to admit it, because admitting it meant admitting that my mother's love came with surveillance built in, that she needed to know I was doing things her way to feel secure in our relationship. She's my mother, I said, which wasn't an answer, but sounded like one. James didn't push. He was smart enough to know that this was a minefield, and I wasn't ready to walk through it yet. But he noticed other things. He noticed that when my family called, I dropped whatever I was doing, even if we were in the middle of something together. He noticed that I apologized constantly, mostly for things that weren't my fault. He noticed that I asked permission for things I didn't need permission for. "You're allowed to have a life," he said once, after I'd canceled plans with him, because my mother needed me to come help her reorganize the garage. "I know that," I said, irritated. "I don't think you do. I think you've been trained to believe that your life is secondary to everyone else's needs." "That's not true," I said, but even as I was saying it, I was thinking about the year I spent helping my mother through her pain. I was thinking about all the nights I'd spent on the phone with her instead of sleeping. I was thinking about how I'd chosen to go to school near home, not near a good nursing program, because my family needed me close. "Okay," James said, and he let it go. But he didn't forget. James proposed about 8 months later. He did it quietly, just the two of us, at a beach at sunset. No audience, no performance. He got down on one knee and asked if I wanted to build a life with him. Not with him and my family, with him. I said yes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was choosing something for myself. Not for anyone else's happiness or comfort or validation. For mine. I was thrilled. I was also terrified. I called my mother to tell her, and I heard her intake of breath, that little gasp people make when they're about to cry or scream or both. "Oh, Elena," she said. "I'm so happy for you." She was happy for me. That was real. But it was also, I realize now, relief. Relief that I was finally conforming to the script. Relief that her daughter was going to have a husband now, which meant she could feel like she'd successfully launched me. Relief that now my focus would shift from her to someone else. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally stop questioning the terms of our relationship. My father was pleased. James had called him first to ask for his blessing, which my father interpreted as the correct order of things. It pleased him that James had respected the hierarchy, even though I didn't need anyone's blessing but my own. Marcus thought it was cool and immediately asked if he could be in the wedding. My mother started planning a wedding, not my wedding, hers. She had opinions about everything: the venue, the date, the guest list, what I should wear, what the ceremony should look like. I made some choices that contradicted her preferences, and she accepted them, but she did so with a particular kind of grace that was really just well-managed disappointment. She'd mention, casually, that the venue I'd chosen was smaller than she would have preferred, but of course it was my wedding, so whatever made me happy made her happy, even though she was clearly sad about it. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. It was small, but it was there. It was the beginning of a recognition that I had been making my mother happy at the expense of making myself happy for my entire life, and I was tired of it. The wedding was beautiful. That sounds generic, but it was. We got married in a garden on a Saturday in June. It rained the day before and cleared just in time. There were about 100 people there. My friends, James's friends, family. My family sat in the front row. My mother was crying before I even walked down the aisle. My father was watching me like I was a project he'd completed. Marcus looked proud, the way someone looks when something they're invested in has come to fruition. I walked down the aisle and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment where my life becomes mine. This is the moment where my old role ends and my new role begins. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. The reception was held in the garden's pavilion. There was food and dancing and toasts. James's father toasted to our future, to the life we'd build together, to the ways we'd grow. My father toasted to family, to traditions, to me finally becoming what I was meant to become. My mother cried through both of them. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, my mother pulled me aside to a quiet corner. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "You've done everything right. You finished school, you got a good job, you found a good man. You've made us all so proud." I thanked her, and then she said something else. "James's family is very comfortable. We've been thinking, your father and I, that now that you're settled, maybe you could help your brother a bit more. He's still in school, and money is tight. We were wondering if you and James might contribute to his tuition for his last year." I felt it happen in my chest. That closing feeling, that sinking feeling, that feeling of being pulled back into a role I thought I was escaping. "Mom," I said carefully, "we just got married. James and I need to build our own life first." "Of course," she said, her face arranging itself into an expression that looked like understanding but felt like judgment. "I didn't mean to presume. It's just family helps family, and Marcus looks up to you so much. He was hoping—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I already knew what Marcus was hoping. Everyone already knew. The assumption was made. Now that I had money, or access to it through James, I had a responsibility to distribute it according to my family's needs. I didn't give her an answer that day. I was too surprised, too confused, too trained to say yes, to ask for time to think about it. That night, after the reception, when James and I were back at our hotel, getting ready to leave for our honeymoon, I told him what my mother had asked. "Are you going to do it?" he asked, carefully, like he already knew the answer, but was asking anyway. "I don't know," I said. "It's my brother. It's also your life, your choices, your money that you've earned. It feels wrong to say no." Why? I couldn't explain it. I just knew that saying no would mean breaking a rule that had been written before I was born, written by people who weren't even in my family, passed down through generations, ingrained into my nervous system. James sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space next to him. I sat, and he took my hand. "I love you," he said, "and I want you to know something. You don't owe your family your life. You don't owe them explanations for your choices, and you especially don't owe them your money, your time, or your happiness. Family is great, but it's supposed to add to your life, not subtract from it. You get to decide what you want to give." "They taught me that giving is love," I said. "They taught you that being drained is love," he said. "Those are different things." Over the next few months, my family began testing the boundaries. My mother called to say she had a health scare. Wasn't serious, but could I come over? I went. She was fine. But the pattern was established. Crisis first, explanation later. My father asked if James could help with a work issue. James politely declined, and my father took it personally, like James had refused to help him specifically, rather than simply declining to get involved in his workplace drama. Marcus asked me to loan him money, not give loan, but we both knew it wouldn't be repaid. When I said I couldn't, he told me I'd changed. He said success was making me selfish. He said he remembered when I was the person who would do anything for family. I gave him the money. I felt sick about it, but I gave it to him. My mother noticed that I wasn't calling as often, and she was hurt. How come I never called her? Didn't I know how lonely she was? My father went to work all day. Marcus was busy with school, and I was too focused on my new life to care about her. She said this while I was at her house on a Tuesday, because she'd asked me to come help her clean, and I'd gone. Even though I had the day off and wanted to rest, something in me cracked that day, just a small crack. Not enough to break anything open yet, just enough to let a little light through. "I came over," I said quietly. "I drove 40 minutes to be here. I've been here for 4 hours, and you're angry that I don't call more often?" She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm sad. There's a difference." "And I'm tired," I said. "There's a difference between that and being ungrateful." We didn't speak about it. We just finished cleaning in silence, and when I left, she didn't hug me at the door the way she usually did. I told James what had happened, and he listened. He didn't say, "I told you so," though he could have. He just held me while I cried, not because I was sad about the confrontation with my mother, but because I was grieving the fact that setting even a tiny boundary made me feel like I was betraying someone I loved. "This is the work," James said. "This is what happens when you start to become real. Everything that was built on you being small starts to shake." 6 months after the wedding, my family had a full intervention. They gathered, my mother, my father, and Marcus, and they called me and asked if I could come over. There was something they wanted to discuss. I knew, walking up to that house, that this was going to be important. I could feel it in the way my stomach was clenching, in the way my hands had started to shake. We sat in the living room, and my mother spoke first. She said they were concerned about me. They said I seemed different. They said I seemed cold, ungrateful, like I'd forgotten where I came from. They said James was clearly poisoning me against them. They said I needed to remember that family comes first, and they were wondering if I wanted to recommit to that. Recommit? I asked. To being there for us, my mother said, like you used to be. I am here for you, I said. I'm here right now. But you're not really, Marcus said. You're not the same Elena. You used to actually care about what was happening in our lives. I do care, I said. Then why did you say no about my tuition? He asked. Why did you say no about the loan? Why do you act like spending time with us is a burden? I never said it was a burden. You don't have to say it, my father said, and this was the first time he'd spoken. We can see it, we can feel it. I sat there, in that living room, where I'd learned to manage everyone else's emotions before my own, and I felt something shift. It wasn't a crack this time, it was a break. You want me to go back to being small, I said. It wasn't a question. We want you to go back to being grateful, my mother said. I am grateful, I said, but gratitude doesn't mean I owe you my entire life. No one said your entire life, my father said. We just said you should help your brother with school. You should call your mother more often. You should prioritize family. I have a family now, I said. James is my family. The words hung in the air like I'd said something obscene. James is your husband, my mother said carefully. We are your family. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You don't just get to replace us. That's not what I'm doing, I said, but I also can't set my entire life on fire to keep your lives warm anymore. Is that what you think we've asked you to do? My mother asked, and her voice was doing that thing where it became very small and hurt, where it demanded comfort. I didn't comfort her. I sat with the discomfort. Yes, I said, that's exactly what I think you've asked me to do. Not explicitly, but every demand, every guilt trip, every reminder of how much you sacrificed. It's all been teaching me that my job is to sacrifice too. And I'm done. My father stood up. You're being disrespectful. I'm being honest, I said. For the first time in my life, I'm being honest about what this relationship is costing me. Marcus looked at me like I was a stranger. I can't believe you're choosing him over us? I'm not choosing him over you, I said. I'm choosing me. I'm choosing a life where I'm not constantly managing everyone else's emotions. I'm choosing a husband who respects my boundaries instead of people who use love as a weapon. That's not betrayal, Marcus. That's survival. I left that day and didn't look back for a long time. The guilt came after, not immediately, but gradually, like water seeping through cracks. It came at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about my mother sitting in that living room, her face crumpling. It came when I saw Marcus's name pop up on my phone, and I didn't answer. It came when I went to the grocery store, and a song from my childhood was playing, and I remembered teaching Marcus to dance to it in the kitchen. James found me sitting on the couch one evening, crying silently. "Talk to me," he said. "I feel like I've abandoned them," I said, "like I'm a terrible person." "You set a boundary," he said. "That's not abandonment." "It feels like it." "That's because you were taught that boundaries are abandonment. That saying no is betrayal. That loving yourself is selfish. Those are lies, Elena. They're very effective lies, but they're still lies." Over the next year, I went to therapy. I read books about family systems and enmeshment. I learned that what I had been calling love was actually something else. It was a transaction where I had been trained to pay for belonging with the currency of myself. I learned that my mother had done to me what her mother had done to her, and her mother's mother had done it before that. I was just one link in a chain that stretched back generations, each woman teaching the next one that her value lived in her usefulness, that her love had to be proven through sacrifice. And I decided I was going to be the link where the chain broke. It didn't happen overnight. For a long time, I still answered my mother's calls. I still felt the guilt when I said no. I still had moments of doubt where I wondered if I was being selfish, if I was being unkind, if I was really the ungrateful person they'd accused me of being. But slowly, something shifted. The guilt started to transform into clarity. I started to see my family not as villains, but as people who had been broken by the same system that was breaking me. My mother had given up her dreams and expected me to give up mine in exchange. My father had learned to equate love with control. My brother had been raised to believe that his sister's life existed to support his. None of them were bad people. They were just people who didn't know how to love in any way other than the way they'd been taught. 5 years have passed since that day in my parents' living room. I've been married to James for 5 years. We have a daughter who is 2 years old. Her name is Sophie, and she's going to grow up differently than I did. She's going to grow up knowing that her feelings matter, that her body belongs to her, that she doesn't owe anyone her love or her labor. That family is something that should add to her life, not subtract from it. I still see my family occasionally. We've reached something that looks like a truce. My mother has softened somewhat. I think she's realized that the way she raised me wasn't something I'm grateful for. It's something I'm healing from. That realization has changed her, maybe not completely, but at the edges. My father and I have a cordial relationship now. We talk about surface things. My mother still tries to make it deeper than that, still tries to get me to engage in the drama, but I don't. I show up, I'm kind, and I leave. Marcus is in his late 20s now. He finished his degree. My parents paid for the last year, not me, and he's working. He's also in therapy, I think, which gives me hope that maybe the chain can still be broken in his generation too. But the biggest shift isn't in my relationship with them. It's in my relationship with myself. I don't feel guilty for wanting things anymore. I don't apologize for prioritizing my life. I don't feel like I'm betraying my family by being happy. Those changes might sound small, but they've reorganized my entire existence. I wake up in the morning, and I don't feel the weight of other people's needs before I feel the weight of my own. I make decisions based on what I want, not on what will make someone else comfortable. I say no, and I don't spend the next 3 hours wondering if I was too harsh, if I could have softened it, if I owe anyone an explanation. James tells me all the time that I'm different now. I ask him if it's good different, and he says it's better different. He says he finally gets to know the real Elena, not the version I've been performing my whole life. That real Elena is imperfect. She's opinionated. She's sometimes angry about things that happened to her before she had the language to name them. She's cautious about relationships. She doesn't give her full self easily anymore because she learned that full selves are consumed by people who don't know how to love them. But she's also alive in a way she wasn't before. And that makes all the difference. People always want the big dramatic moment where everything changes. They want the scene where you walk out triumphant and never look back. But real change isn't usually like that. Real change is smaller and quieter and more profound. Real change is me calling my mother once a week instead of whenever she needs something. It's me hanging up when the conversation becomes about her guilt or my gratitude. It's me leaving a family dinner early because I'm tired and not apologizing for it. Real change is me not asking for permission to be happy. It's me buying things because I want them, not because someone else needs them. It's me saying no to a friend who's taking too much from me and not feeling like I'm betraying the friendship by doing so. Real change is me realizing that Sophie doesn't need a perfect mother. She needs a real one. A mother who has boundaries. A mother who says no. A mother who models what self-respect looks like. I remember the first time Sophie asked me for something and I said no. She was maybe 18 months old, wanting to play with something that wasn't safe. She cried. I didn't give in. And I watched, amazed, as she eventually accepted the boundary and moved on to something else. That moment crystallized something for me. I realized that my parents were terrified of my disappointment. They had made it their responsibility to prevent it, and in doing so, they had never taught me how to handle disappointment, how to accept a no, how to move forward when things don't go my way. They were trying to protect me, I think. But they were actually crippling me. I wrote my mother a letter about 6 months after I stopped regular contact. I never sent it, but I wrote it anyway. It was important to write it. It was important to name all the things I had been too afraid to name. Dear Mom, I'm writing this letter to tell you things I don't think I can say to your face without you turning them into something about your pain, your sacrifice, your disappointment in me. I want you to know that I'm not angry at you anymore. I'm sad. I'm sad that you gave up your dreams, but I'm sadder that you expected me to give up mine in exchange. I'm sad that you learned to measure love in units of sacrifice, and you taught me to do the same. I'm sad that you were never taught to love yourself, so you couldn't teach me either. I want you to know that I'm grieving the mother I didn't have. The mother who would have encouraged me to be independent. The mother who would have celebrated my choices, even if they weren't her choices. The mother who would have loved me without needing me to be useful in return. I want you to know that I'm grateful for the things you did do. You kept me alive. You fed me. You clothed me. You helped me through some difficult times. Those are real things, and I acknowledge them. But I also want you to know that you taught me to hate myself. You taught me that my body was something to be ashamed of. You taught me that my feelings were less important than everyone else's. You taught me that I owed everyone access to me, and that refusing was a betrayal of love. Those are also real things, and I need you to know that I'm naming them not to hurt you, but to heal myself. I want you to know that I'm rebuilding my life without you. That doesn't mean I hate you. It means I love me more. I never sent that letter. I realized I didn't need to. The act of writing it was the important part. It was the part where I said all the things I'd been swallowing for 30 years. It was the part where I finally got to be angry without having to manage someone else's feelings about my anger. About a year and a half ago, my family tested the boundaries again. They do this periodically, like they're checking to see if maybe I've changed my mind, if maybe I've reconsidered, if maybe I'm ready to go back to the way things were. My father had a health scare. Nothing serious, but serious enough. He had chest pain, went to the hospital, got some tests done, and everything came back mostly fine. But for a few days, while they were waiting for results, it was uncertain. My mother called me and cried and told me that she needed me, that family should rally together in times of crisis, that I needed to put aside whatever anger I was holding and just be there. I heard the manipulation in it. I heard the old script playing, but I also heard something else. I heard genuine fear. My father might die someday, and my mother was afraid, and she was reaching for me because I was the person she'd trained to absorb her fear. So I went. I didn't go because I owed it to them. I went because I could choose to, because I wanted to, and because I didn't need their approval to make that decision. I sat in the waiting room with my mother and Marcus. I held her hand. I let her cry. I didn't fix anything or take responsibility for her feelings. I just witnessed them. When my father came out and the doctor said he was fine, my mother released all this tension she'd been holding, and she looked at me with this expression of gratitude that almost broke my heart. "Thank you for being here," she said. "Of course," I said. "He's my father." "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you cared anymore." And this was the moment where, before, I would have spent the next 3 hours reassuring her, proving to her that I cared, working to undo the pain of the boundary I'd set. But I didn't do that this time. I came because I wanted to, I said gently, not because I owe it to you. That's an important difference, Mom. I get to choose whether I show up for you. And I do choose that sometimes. But I don't do it out of obligation. I do it out of choice. And the moment it becomes obligation again, I'll have to step back. She looked at me like she didn't understand what I was saying. I don't think she has language for it, the idea that love could be a choice rather than a debt, but I think maybe she's starting to understand. Last month, my mother called me with an idea. She wanted to do a big family reunion. She wanted all of us together. Me, James, Sophie, Marcus, his girlfriend, my father, her. She wanted to make it about showing people that we're a strong family unit, that we stuck together through my difficult time. As she's taken to calling the period where I wasn't available to everyone, I listened to her explain the plan, and I felt that old pressure start to build in my chest. That pressure that says, this is what you're supposed to want. This is what family means. This is your role. And then I asked her a question. What do you want from me at this reunion? She seemed confused by the question. Nothing, honey, just your presence. But what do you really want? Do you want me to perform happiness? Do you want me to explain to extended family why I'm not as involved as I used to be? Do you want me to validate your narrative about how I went through a phase and now I'm better? There was a long silence. I want things to be like they used to be, she said finally. I know, I said, and I'm sorry, but they can't be. I can't be like I used to be, and honestly, you don't want that. You want the version of me that was slowly disappearing, that was becoming less real every year. You don't actually want me. You want the function I served. That was harsh, maybe, but it was true, and I was finally allowed to say true things. That's not fair, she said. I do want you. You want what I can do for you, I said. That's different. I didn't go to the reunion. I sent my apologies. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just said I had made a different choice. My mother was hurt. I heard about it through Marcus, who was trying to mediate, trying to get me to understand her perspective. I told him that I did understand her perspective. I'd been living inside her perspective my entire life. What I needed was to live inside my own. He didn't have a response to that. The strange thing about finally leaving is that it's not what you expect it to be. You think you're going to feel free, and you do, eventually. But first, you feel guilty and sad and angry and confused and terrified that you're making the biggest mistake of your life. You grieve for a very long time, not for the people, necessarily. You grieve for the narrative you were supposed to have, the good daughter, the loyal sister, the one who sacrificed herself on the altar of family. It took me about 2 years to get through the worst of it. 2 years of therapy, of crying in my car, of having panic attacks, because my mother sent me a photo of her at Christmas, and I felt the old pull, the old, "you should be there," whispering in my ear. But somewhere in the middle of that grief, something shifted. I realized I could grieve the narrative without going back to living it. I could be sad about what I didn't have without sacrificing what I do have. And then came the freedom, not the kind you see in movies, with someone running through a field with their arms open, but the kind you feel every morning when you wake up and you don't have anyone else's expectations crushing your chest. I wake up now and I think about what I want, not what I should want, not what would make someone else happy. What I want. I want to make breakfast with my daughter without checking my phone. I want to have quiet time without feeling guilty about it. I want to say no and have that be the end of the conversation. I want to be a good person without having to destroy myself to prove it. These are simple things, but they're revolutionary in a family like mine. I think about Sophie sometimes, and I wonder what her life is going to be like. She won't have the same grandmother I had, the one who taught me that my body and my time were public property. She won't grow up believing that love is something you have to earn through usefulness. I'm deliberately teaching her something different. I'm teaching her that her body belongs to her, that her feelings are valid, that she doesn't owe anyone access to her, not even family. I'm teaching her that boundaries are love, that saying no is something a strong person does, not a weak person, that she gets to decide what she's willing to give and what she's not. I'm teaching her, in other words, to be free. And I know that means she might one day be angry with me for things I've done or said or failed to do. Parenting is not a perfect enterprise, and I will make mistakes, but I hope those mistakes will be the kind she can set down, not the foundational kind that shape her entire understanding of what she owes to the people who raised her. I hope she grows up knowing she's enough, just as she is, that her productivity doesn't determine her worth, that she doesn't have to sacrifice herself to prove her love. I hope that I, by doing the hard work of boundaries, am giving her a different inheritance. Not guilt, but permission. Not obligation, but choice. No one told me that leaving would be this hard. No one told me that the guilt would last for years. No one told me that I'd see my mother's face in my dreams and wake up feeling like I'd committed a crime. No one told me that I'd have moments where I questioned everything, where I wondered if maybe they were right, if maybe I was being selfish, if maybe I should try harder to make it work. No one told me that healing is not linear, that you can be doing great and then something small happens. A song, a familiar phrase, a smell, and suddenly you're right back in that living room, defending yourself against people who claim to love you. No one told me that setting boundaries with your family is one of the loneliest things you can do, that people will judge you for it, that they'll take your family's side because family loyalty is a powerful narrative, and people believe in it even when it hurts you. No one told me that some of your friends would drift away because being around you means facing their own family situations, and they're not ready to do that yet. No one told me that I would eventually stop being angry, and that would almost be worse, because anger is easy to live with. Clarity is harder. No one told me any of this, but I'm telling you now, if you're thinking about setting boundaries with your family, if you're thinking about stepping away, if you're thinking about finally saying no after a lifetime of saying yes, I'm telling you it's worth it. It's worth the guilt and the loneliness and the grief. It's worth the people who won't understand. It's worth the Christmases alone and the phone calls you don't answer and the family events you miss. Because freedom, actual freedom, is worth everything. I'm 32 years old and I'm happy. That sounds simple, but it's not. It's the result of years of work, of therapy, of hard conversations, of choosing myself over and over again when that choice made people angry. I have a husband who respects my boundaries. I have a daughter who is learning what healthy love looks like. I have a job that I do because I want to do it, not because I have to prove my value through my labor. I have a life that is mine. My mother still calls sometimes. We still have a relationship, though it's different now. She's learned that if she pushes too hard, I'll pull back. She's learned that I don't respond to guilt anymore. I think she's disappointed by that, but I also think it's freed her in a weird way. She doesn't have to manage me anymore. She doesn't have to worry that I'm resentful. I'm just my own person. My father and I have reached some kind of peace. We don't talk about deep things, but we talk. He asks about my work. He watches Sophie, and I see something soften in him when he's around her. Maybe he's regretting the ways he was with me. Maybe he's learning something from watching me parent. Maybe it's both. Marcus is doing his own work. I don't know all of it, but I know he's in therapy. I know he's questioning some of the patterns. I think maybe the chain is breaking in his generation too, which gives me hope. But mostly, I'm just living my life. I'm not performing happiness. I'm not managing everyone else's emotions. I'm not sacrificing myself on the altar of family obligation. I'm just being. I started this story by saying my name is Elena and I'm 32 years old. I ended it by saying I'm happy. That's not the whole story. The whole story is much more complicated and messy and painful and beautiful than those two statements suggest. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the whole story doesn't fit into one neat narrative. Maybe it's just a series of moments where you choose yourself and then you have to choose yourself again and again and again, until one day you realize you don't have to think about it anymore. Choosing yourself has become as natural as breathing. If you're struggling with your family right now, if you're feeling the weight of obligation, if you're wondering if it's okay to want something different, I'm telling you, it is. It's more than okay. It's necessary. Set your boundaries. They might call you selfish. They might cry. They might threaten to cut you off. They might do all of those things. But on the other side of that pain is freedom, and freedom is worth everything. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helped you understand something about your own.